What's up, y'all? So in this video, we're going to be going over the production possibilities curve. And this is going to be part 1 of 2 on the PPC. What do you call a ghost true love? His ghoul friend. The production possibilities curve. So before we start, we're going to be looking at a lot of graphs in both micro and macroeconomics. And so whenever we look at a graph or a model, we're always going to follow these 4 steps. Number 1, we're always going to explain the concept or the graph in words. Number 2, we're then going to add numbers onto it for an example. Number 3, we're going to generate graphs from those numbers. And then lastly, we're going to make some generalizations. So no matter what model or graph that we're talking about, these are the steps that we're going to follow here. So let's move on. So the production possibilities curve, right? So otherwise, right, we are going to label it as the PPC. You might also see it as the PPF, the production possibilities frontier. You could also see it as the PPG, the production possibilities graph. So no matter sort of which acronym or which term that you see, if you see the word production possibilities in front of it, right, then you know it's talking about the graph that we're talking about in this video. So what the PPC shows us, the PP shows us just different ways that an economy can use its scarce resources. So yet again, we are looking at this idea of scarcity here. And so the reason why we talk about this graph first is because it ties together everything that we've been talking about so far. This idea of scarcity, this idea of a trade-off of opportunity cost and efficiency. So this one graph shows us these 4 different things. And so when we're looking at our PPC, there are 4 key assumptions that we're going to hold constant. And so these 4 key assumptions are never going to change whenever we're looking at this graph. And if these assumptions do change, then the graph is going to change here. So here, the first thing is that only 2 goods can be produced. Right? And that's a very key thing. We're only going to be looking at 2 goods. Number 2, there are full employment of resources. In other words, as we're looking at this hypothetical country, we're going to assume that all the resources within the nation, so all the workers, all the land, all the labor, all sort of the capital, is being used towards the production of these 2 goods. Number 3, fixed resources. So it's the Latin phrase is ceteris paribus. Basically, there isn't going to be a sudden increase or sudden decrease in the amount of resources available. And then lastly, fixed technology. We're never going to assume that there's this technological advancement, or neither are we going to assume that there's this technological disadvancement. I don't know what, right now the term is not coming to my head. All right, so these are our 4 key assumptions. And so here, what we see here is a production possibilities table. And so what the production possibility table shows us is it just shows us the numbers. That's all it does. So in this hypothetical country, there are 2 goods that are being produced, bikes and computers. And so if we're going back to our 4 key assumptions, that means, right, that this country is only producing bikes and computers, and all the resources available within this hypothetical country are being used towards the production of bikes and the production of computers. And if you notice, right, there are different points here. We have point A, point B, point C, point D, and point E. So what this table is trying to show us is if this hypothetical country is producing at point A, that means they're using all their resources for the production of 14 bikes and 0 computers. On the other hand, if they're producing at point E, well, that means they're pouring all their resources towards the production of 0 bikes and 8 computers here. That's why it says each point represents a specific combination of goods that can be produced given a full employment of resources here. So in this scenario, right, there is no scenario where they can produce 12 bikes and 4 computers. Right? They can't do that. They can either produce 12 bikes and 2 computers or 9 bikes and 4 computers there. And so now if we put this on a graph, right, what does this actually look like? Well, here, right, we have bikes and computers, right? So let's put bikes on our y-axis and computers on our x-axis here. And so here, I know I don't have the numbers here, but essentially what this graph should look like is something like this. And this is our PPC. And so here, right, this question that we see on the screen here, well, how does the PPC demonstrate scarcity, trade-offs, opportunity costs, and efficiency? Right? Well, here it demonstrates scarcity, right? Well, here, if we're using all of our resources towards the production of bikes and computers, well, that means because of scarcity, this country is going to have to make a choice. Are they going to be producing at point A, where they're only producing bikes or no computers? Are they going to be producing at point E, where they're only producing computers and no bikes? Or are they going to be producing somewhere around point C, right, where they're producing some bikes and some computers, right? And of course, right, we have point B and point D here. Which then gets into trade-offs and opportunity costs, right? If this country says we want to produce more bikes, well, what are they giving off? What are the trade-offs and what are the opportunity costs? Well, here, if this country, let's say they don't want any computers, they want more bikes. Well, here, the more bikes that they produce, the more computers they are going to have to give up. Why? Well, because of scarcity. This hypothetical country can't be producing 14 bikes and 8 computers. They're going to have to pick and choose sort of how many bikes and how many computers they are going to want to produce here. Well, what about efficiency? Well, luckily for us, efficiency is pretty simple. If they are anywhere on the PPC, they are efficient. That's pretty simple. So on this graph right here, if they are at any point on this red line, this country is being efficient. They are using all their resources, their full employment of goods, and the yada, yada, yada. They are efficient. If the point falls inside the curve, let's call this point G, right? Then here they are being inefficient. Also, if they are outside the curve, they are also inefficient here. So in other words, if at any point you are on the PPC, you are efficient. If you're outside or inside the PPC, you are inefficient. And really, if you're at point F, this is really unattainable, right? You can't attain it. Why? Well, because you can't be more efficient than max efficient. And that's what the PPC represents. If you're on the curve, you are maximizing your efficiency. And so here's the guided practice for you guys. If you guys want an additional video, we'll go over this during our Google Meet time. But if you want to check along your answers, it's going to be in sort of the notes section there. And so with the PPC, right, yet again, we see the production possibilities table. But there are two different types of PPCs that you have to know. This one is called a constant opportunity cost PPC. The reason why it's a constant opportunity cost is because the resources are adaptable for producing either good. And so if you notice here, we are producing calzones and pizzas. And so yet again, if we're going back to our 4 assumptions of the PPC, this country is putting all their resources towards the production of calzones and or pizzas. But good for this country because the resources needed for a pizza are the same resources needed to make a calzone, right? A calzone is just a folded up pizza. And so here, right, the resources here are easily adaptable. They're interchangeable when you're producing calzone or a pizza. And so that means for a constant opportunity cost, our curve is going to look a little bit different, right? Our curve is just going to be a straight line. And so this is, remember, a constant opportunity cost PPC. And all the same rules apply, right? If you're on the curve, you're still efficient. If you're inside the curve, you're inefficient. If you're outside the curve, you're still inefficient, but really we're going to call this unattainable, right? Right? And so our last type of PPC is going to be called the law of increasing opportunity cost. And so what this PPC is saying is that the more you produce of pizzas, the more you're giving up of producing robots because of scarcity, right? So let's say you're producing 20 pizzas. Well, here that means you can't be producing any robots. But let's say you want a little bit of robots here. So let's say you decide to produce 10 pizzas. That means you can produce 3 robots here, right? So the more pizzas, so as you go from point D to point A, you're producing more pizzas. You went from producing 10 pizzas to 20 pizzas. But because of scarcity, you have a trade-off. You have the opportunity cost, which is you're giving up the production of robots. And so here, right, you go from producing 3 robots at point D all the way down to producing 0 robots at point A. And so that's a law of increasing opportunity cost here. And then we can do it backwards also, right? We can say, if you want to produce more robots, you could be producing at point E where you're producing 4 robots, but at the same time you're producing 0 pizzas, right? But then here you're giving up robots to produce pizzas there, right? It's the same concept. And so here with the law of increasing opportunity cost, it's the concaved or the curved out PPC like we talked about earlier, right? So this is the increasing cost PPC. And yet again, you're efficient if you're on the curve, you're inefficient if you're inside the curve, right? Inefficient. And then it's unattainable if you're outside the curve there. All right, so I do have some practice AP questions here. If you guys noticed in the past ones, I'm going to make a separate video explaining or going through each one of these practice AP questions because this is really the first concept that's going to be somewhat heavily tested in the multiple choice portion of the AP exam. All right, guys, so that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.